guy, Sam Rosen, said on the broadcast tonight, we're recording right after the Vegas game.
Literally right after the game just ended.
Game just ended. 3 a.m. he came in to Boston to play. And this is how he's playing. This guy does everything. Chris Nealon said it once, and it just sticks with me forever. You win on the boards, you win in front of the net, you win on the back check. He does all those things. All right, so let's start with the trade itself. I was on air when it broke. You guys were my baseboard on everything. So tell me your opinions.
Well, I was using a little boy's room when it broke, which was like, I honestly think that's the first time that's ever happened to me. So I was just sitting there like, whoa, what the? By the way, also, gotta rep, going back to RPI real quick, the big red freak out, dude, you gotta love college hockey. Stuff like that's just amazing. And also the freak out with the exclamation point on their sweaters, just, that's golden. But no, I mean, I at first was shocked. I actually didn't think that they were going to make this trade happen. And honestly, I thought that what we gave up for Miller I thought it was a fair deal. You know, the Canucks are getting a guy that in Chytil that, you know, still needs a little bit of work to start putting the puck in the net, but he's not like super raw. I think they can really make a push, and as long as he stays healthy, he'll be a big part of that team. And of course, you know, Mancini's a great prospect. He wouldn't really have had much room to make it with the Rangers, but he for sure will with Vancouver. So, what do you think, Steve-O?
You know, I think right off the bat, you know, I had the same reaction as you, Mike. You know, and we say this on the pod all the time. You know, it's not really fair to grade a trade right after it happens. You know, no one for sure is going to know how this is going to play out. You know, Miller coming back to New York. You know, there's just so many factors, and I don't think this addresses, you know, the Rangers' core issue. But I love it. You know, I think the Rangers clearly won this trade. Now, yes, you know, Chytil, I think we all could shed a tear, you know. But with that being said, never forget, Chytil all alone in the playoffs. That wraparound goal against Tampa in the Eastern Conference Final, 22. But I love this move. I think this is a great move all around. I think the Rangers won this. You know, I think if we're giving out grades, I see a lot of, you know, grades going out on social media and Twitter. You know, some people think that the Canucks won this. But I think it's very obvious the Rangers won this. You know, they got the best player by far in the trade. And listen, you don't have to look too far to see his impact in 2 games. Not even that. You know, it's not like, you know, he's fully rested. You know, with him getting to Boston late. You know, having the 2 goals in Boston, 2 assists tonight against Vegas. Not even that, but I think I was more impressed with his physicality. You know, he was throwing bodies left and right. Mm-hmm. He was battling for the puck and the boards. I was also impressed on the second power play that we had. You know, he was out there. You know, he double shifted on that, and I think, you know, it's good. That's going to be big moving forward. You know, down the line. So I loved it. You know, I'll flip it back to you, Matt. But it's an A+ move in my book for the Rangers.
All right, this is my big take. You know, this is what we've been talking about for a long time, right? The player that plays this brand and can also, you know, score goals and chip in when it matters most. He's on power play 1. He created the goal, the Lafreniere goal, by driving to the net and taking that defender away. That's why Lafreniere was wide open. 2 goals in Boston in a game that no one else really showed. He arrived at 3 a.m. That's adrenaline, right? But outside of that, I love his details in his game. You know, it was funny. I talked to Colby Cohn about this, like what makes a detailed hockey player. And he does all the things. He checks all those boxes. On top of it, former 100-point scorer. You know, there was a lot going on in Vancouver. The noise, you know, a Canadian city, it just took over. And you could tell that he already has the juices again in New York. And granted, the last time he was in New York, he was the guy that wasn't getting the ice time. He was the rookie that was trying to break in, similar to Kakko's situation, right? So I love the move. I understand 31 years old, but this is the big picture that I talked about with Mike actually over the weekend. There's concern about the end of the contract. And I think that I actually think this is like the stupidest thing I've ever said. But the New York Rangers in 5 years are going to make a big trade or sign a big free agent. Like, I just don't think that when we talk about the letter, that I do see a lot of the benefits of the letter and a rebuild and how they advance that rebuild. But I also think that all this concern that a 31-year-old player that moved his nullified his no trade to come to New York, he's now going to be here for long term. And if his impact starts to diminish, the New York Rangers will likely bring in another asset. So I know it doesn't solve your problems, but we've seen, especially in this regime, if Drew's still around then, probably not, that they'll cut bait if it's necessary. They did it with Gabbert. They traded for Brassard, John Moore, and Derek Dorsett. Nobody thought they would have the impact they did. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I think on the Miller side, I love it. The term, is it concerning down the road? Maybe. But I don't think it's a concern for the club overall. I don't think they're going to not find their way out of it. And I also think the tough thing with Chytil is just the question marks. I'm glad, though, they did not surrender any of the rumored packages, boys. I mean, we saw Ottman, Perreault, Loff, and Schneider all named, as well as Keandre Miller, which, granted, I know that tonight was a good night for him, but, it would have been harder to see some of those guys go.
Yeah, but why was it a good night for Keandre tonight? Was because you heard Joe say it on the broadcast. Was it Joe? Maybe it was Brian Boyle. J.T. Miller was screaming on him on the bench to shoot the puck. Dude, just shoot the puck. And what did Keandre do tonight? He shot the puck and he scored basically the game-winning goal.
And that was vintage Keandre.
Absolutely.
We've seen him score like that time and time again. And
Miller even made Zibanejad go back to vintage Zibanejad, which is something that we've been waiting for all season. And he finally had a good game. And you know what, Chags? I like what you said about oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh, I completely went out of my head.
I did throw a lot out there.
Yeah, you know what? Steve-O, you take over. Let me gather my thoughts.
That's okay. You're rehashing out the game-winning Miller goal. I love that. I'll say this on the Canucks and your point, Matt. I do agree with you. But I also don't think the Canucks were. Let's be honest, the Canucks were in a very brutal position, and I think they were obviously gonna take a below market return for Miller or Pettersson.
That's what I was gonna say, Steve-O.
Because this situation was unfixable, and they had to do something. Everybody in the league knew
it was the same as Trubisic. We saw it from our end this year.
Exactly. And you see when these things fizzle out and get so bad, there's no solution. You got to move out. We saw with Trouba, you now see with Miller. And I think the only thing that hurts you, or not hurt you, but you worry about is Chytil. Chytil is the X factor in this trade. What is he, 24, 25? He still hasn't reached the prime of his career, and we've seen flashes of him, whether it was in 22, 23, even a little spurts here and there this year, he could really make an impact. But like you say, Matt, all the time it's the injuries, especially the concussions. And if there's one thing that ends, an NHL career, it's concussions. That's just something, when you get them, you constantly get them. You see it in the NFL too, and I think that, these injuries have kind of derailed Chytil's career a little bit. I think Mancini, I'm not really worried about. When we re-signed Borgen, I think the need to keep Mancini here in New York, dropped very much. You basically have, 3 right-hand shots on the blue line, that would be ahead of Mancini. So I'm not really worried about him. I wasn't really crazy about him in the first place, and I think, again, all around, win-win. Win for the Rangers. I can't speak for the Canucks right now, but it seems like the Rangers are in a better position than the Canucks. Right now.
You know what? I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to jump in. Yeah, because Steve-O, you brought up exactly what I was going to say. Was the Canucks, they were in the bad position here, and I think it was really, really smart. Even though it was frustrating to the point where I was like, Drury, just make the blockbuster trade. Even though I originally said I don't know if I want Miller, he waited the Canucks out, and it was basically a war of attrition, and eventually they were going to have to give up Miller. And I think the fact that Drury kind of played the waiting game and was like, look, no one else is really in on Miller. There were a few other teams that checked in, but we were the only serious team that did. I think that very much help the Rangers in the long run. And I thought it was masterful that Drury did that, even though all of Rangerstown was like, why is he waiting? Hey, I guess he outsmarted all of us.
Well, first of all, shout out Rick Dallowall was the man that was covering this for like 4 seasons out in Vancouver. This poor man probably hasn't slept in like 3 months. So I want to shout him out. But on the contrary, I also love that first, thank God it's not Elijah Pettersson, because
I was just
he would
thinking
have
that.
been. I just can't imagine if the Rangers are trying to build an identity. And, Kaplan said this for a long time, Emily Kaplan, like, this is what they're trying to build towards, and they want that player that can mix it up and do both. We saw Will Cooley do it tonight, right? He's another one of those players with that brand and style. So, yeah, and I think with Chytil, it, again, like you said, Steve-O, sad to see him go, right? He's young. But we're also seeing, like, with Buchnevich, there is also a level that these players reach where you kind of know what they're going to be. And Chytil, to me, is like probably a 70-point scorer. Lord save us if he's 80 plus, right? But at the same token, J.T. Miller is an established 90 to 100-point scorer the last few seasons when he was at his peak and successful. And I think he's now surrounded by even more talent. He has Artemi Panarin, the shell of Mika Zibanejad, who he dragged 3 points out of tonight. So I also think he's surrounded by a little bit more in this top 6 than he was in Vancouver.
Listen, if he's going to be the catalyst to get us into the playoffs, who knows? I mean, really, he's been what this team has been missing. And it's funny because I feel like last pod we were like, I don't know. But I really think that deep down, a lot of Ranger fans were like, we don't really want to give up what the Canucks were asking more than we don't want JT Miller. And there were some Ranger fans who were concerned about his character. It's funny because I feel like these last 2 games, Joe Micheletti has been really highlighting the fact that Miller is like a captain. He was an assistant in Vancouver. I remember there were talks the first time around when he was on the Rangers that he was in the talks of being an assistant. I can't remember. Was he an assistant captain?
I think he was.
He was, right? Okay, yeah. Because he's got those qualities, and the fact that he was able to draw that out of Mika, to draw that out of Keandre tonight, that is going to be huge going forward. And I don't think a lot of Ranger fans had that in their mind when these trade talks were going down. And I really like that Joe Micheletti's been highlighting that, because the Rangers didn't really care. Not that they didn't care, but they weren't worried about what his point production was going to be. They were worried about him being a leader, because we never had good leadership besides maybe Trocheck this year. And having a voice like that is a big plus. You look at past Ranger teams, Mark Messier type players that aren't afraid to get up in players' grills and say, why are you not shooting the puck? Dude, why are you letting all these guys walk around you? You need a guy like that in the locker room. So I'm glad that
accountability. Accountability in the room.
Exactly.
Accountability.
Exactly.
Which I like. I like that, Mike. Also, not to mention on the point side, the last time the Rangers had 2 100-point scores, 91-92. There's still potential for that. Maybe not this year, but next year, as long as Panarin and Miller are still around. So keep an eye on that too.
It's infectious too. The way Miller plays, I think it rubbed off on the whole team.